did all my education, all my work to helping Black folks move forward and helping us advance as a community. Here in Minnesota, we don't have a lot of Black people here, but we do have Black folks here. Traditionally, people don't think that we do. But as we know now, after George Floyd was murdered, Philando Castile was also murdered, people started to recognize that we do got Black folks in Minnesota, and they're going through hell to a certain extent. Some of us are doing well, and many of us aren't. And I always knew that. I always recognized that I was able to see that at a very young age and try to figure out how do I help make sure that my community is healthy and can heal through a lot of the things that we've gone through. So that's been my journey for the most part. A little bit more about me. I'm married. I've been married for 10 years. Yeah, 10 years now. I should know that. And I got 3 daughters as well. So I try to be a family man and a role model, and I try to show up as much as I can, but also understand that I'm also going through my own healing journey as I'm assisting others as well.
Welcome to the We Got Problems podcast with co-hosts Curtis G. Martin, Rhonda L. Brown, and Khalif Johnson Sr., the one and only podcast where solutions get discussed to our community's everyday troubles. Each week, you will hear mind-blowing conversations and actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become more effective. We got problems and we got solutions.
All right, you guys, welcome to the show. This is We Got Problems, where we discuss solutions. I'm Curtis G. Martin, and I'm here with my co-host, Rhonda L. Brown.
Hey, everybody.
Here with my other co-host, Khalif Johnson Sr.
Peace, y'all. How y'all doing?
And we have a special guest in the house today, Brandon Jones.
Greetings, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, Brandon, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Brandon Jones. I'm born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, also known as the part of the Twin Cities with Minneapolis. Grew up in a household full of trauma and drama, seeing a lot of domestic violence as a kid, bounced around a little bit. I was really a nerd, believe it or not. I was a nerd, and I could play football really well. So most people didn't realize I was a nerd because I was more labeled as an athlete to kind of survive. And, my life took an interesting turn a few weeks before my 12th birthday when I found out that the person I thought was my dad wasn't my dad. He was my stepfather, and he was the father of my 2 younger brothers. And that was huge because it was like all the family secrets unraveled, and it was identity forming time for myself to really figure out, okay, now that my mom has been keeping a secret from me, who am I really? And I remember I was a very angry kid, and I used to display that anger out as on the football field, really, and then on the off seasons in the weight room. Just because I was so frustrated. I didn't know. I was searching for my identity as a young man, trying to figure some things out. Always had good grades, never really got in trouble, did stuff to get in trouble. But since my grades were good, I kind of slid under the radar. Nobody questioned anything or, checked in on Brandon because his grades are good, so he's fine. Ended up going to the University of Minnesota where I studied sociology. And then from there, I got into the mental health world, worked in a psych ward, worked in transitional housing with young people. Then about 2 years into that, got a master's degree in what's called community psychology. Then I went back to grad school and got another master's in psychotherapy, practiced as a therapist for about close to 7 years, got burnt out, and then went into management. And I'm currently the executive director of an organization called Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health, where we work with professionals, families, and young people around, how mental health interferes and engages in their life. A lot of folks know me for doing a lot of trainings in historical, intergenerational, and racial trauma, and just trying to figure out, how to help folks. Always dedicated all my education, all my work to helping Black folks move forward and helping us advance as a community. Here in Minnesota, we don't have a lot of Black people here, but we do have Black folks here. Traditionally, people don't think that we do. But as we know now, after George Floyd was murdered, Philando Castile was also murdered, people started to recognize that we do got Black folks in Minnesota, and they're going through hell to a certain extent. Some of us are doing well, and many of us aren't. And I always knew that. I always recognized that I was able to see that at a very young age and try to figure out how do I help make sure that my community is healthy and can heal through a lot of the things that we've gone through. So that's been my journey for the most part. A little bit more about me. I'm married. I've been married for 10 years. Yeah, 10 years now. I should know that. And I got 3 daughters as well. So I try to be a family man and a role model, and I try to show up as much as I can, but also understand that I'm also going through my own healing journey as I'm assisting others as well.
So it's not often that we get to talk to a mental health expert. So before we dive into the mental health part of it, we heard you was an author. What's the name of your book?
You know what? It's funny because people don't really catch that all the time, and I don't put it out there because I'm not proud of the book I wrote because I've changed so much in my mentality. But I turned my first master's thesis into a book. It's on Black male leadership. It was a self-published thing. I don't promote it. It's not even out there. You're gonna have to like hit me up on the low to get a copy of it. I'll send you a PDF. But the reason why I don't talk about that and put that out there is because the thoughts that I had when I did that 12, almost 13 years ago are way different. I think that what we need in our community when it comes to leadership is very different from that time period. There are some pieces in there that I still agree with, but for my main thesis, I don't agree with it anymore. And I'll tell you why. And then we can talk about this. I think this is important. What I've discovered really like the last 4 years, I've been really thinking about what does it mean to be a leader in the Black community, and why do other groups, ethnic groups in this country, not identify leaders? And I thought about it, and what I realized was because those other groups have social engineers, they have institutions, and that's what the leadership is. They have culture, sometimes religion or other things that lead their culture, and that's what facilitates their growth and development. Whereas Black folks, we have a lot of trauma within our cultural group that interferes with our institutions and our social engineers. And plus, our social engineers are controlled by other people. The dollars come from other corporations or folks who are not a part of our community. Therefore, their goals are met as far as how they want us to play in the society. And that's why I realized this thirst for leadership that we have is really a thirst for direction. It's really a thirst for institutions. It's really a thirst for a different culture, but we don't call it that because we don't recognize it as that. So if I was to write another book, that's what it would be on. And what I mean by institutions, there's really three core ones, maybe four, that I would identify. The first one is the institution of family. Like that's our biggest hurdle. And that's why when we look online, when we go on community and we talk about how to help Black folks, it always goes back to relationships. We always get back into the Kevin Samuels conversations because that's really our biggest issue is the male-female dynamic. Whether you're homosexual or not, the male-female dynamic has to be functional in order for a community to grow. Whether you're sleeping with the person or not, men and women have to function in cooperation in order to develop community and society. But also we have to have women to women relationships need to be solid, and male to male relationships need to be solid as well. So it's a three-pronged approach when it comes to our relationship dynamics. The next one is education. And what happened was we have given up the teaching tools and the learning institutions to media and other institutions when it comes to educating our children. If you look at other ethnic communities, their kids go to public schools, their kids are on social media, but then they have these other buffers that make sure that those cultural groups get to carry on their legacies and their culture. Now, some groups don't have those. Some groups come here, they get Americanized, and then they're wondering what the heck happened to their history and their lineage. But some groups do have those, and those are the groups that usually are doing a lot better. And then when I look at that and I compare us to other groups, I'm like, hey, what happened? Right? What happened to our free? Why do we have freedom schools and why aren't they funded very well? What happened to our rites of passage programs? Right? And how do we make sure that those things are embedded in not just summer programs, but embedded in how we operate culture in order for our kids to be able to have, what I would consider successful lives and opportunities to lead in this society. So education is a big institution as well. The next one is we got to have financial institutions. We have to play in this capitalistic society. If we don't play in it, we will end up being tools for other people as they play in this society. And that's what's happened for a lot of us. Some of us have reached some financial success, but collectively we should be leading industries. Here in Minnesota, we have a huge Somali population. And I've seen them over the last, they've been strong here probably for about 20, 25 years. And as I've seen them develop and how they've started to lead into industries, it's pretty fascinating. They started off just driving taxi cabs, or they might have just had like a little market, and now they have their own grocery stores and they have their own schools. and now they're getting apartment complexes, and now they're getting into politics just in 25 years. And I'm like, damn, how did they figure that out? Now are they getting more Americanized in the process? Absolutely, but they're playing the game. They're understanding how to live within this society, and they're making us look bad here, to be honest, when we compare ethnic groups.
So I have something to put in with that, because I would say and I guess our little cue card we had with these questions on it, like, just turned me a whole different direction with some of your response. But historically, Baptist churches,
that's the fourth,
was our guide, and it was a trustworthy thing. Do you think that's been infiltrated as well?
Absolutely. That was the fourth institution I was getting to. Okay. Financials, and then our religious and spirituality centers. Now, this gets tricky because, church and religion gets people super emotional. But that was our guiding force for so long. Whether it was the religion we brought with us or we created, that don't matter. It was what was in place and what kept us in a moral box. I would say that it gave us boundaries. It gave us expectation. It gave us vision. But what happened in the 70s with our church? Our churches went towards prosperity. And it started to become get all that money. Reverend Ike is a great example of this. He started talking like a motivational speaker, not like a pastor. And the churches that went the prosperity route did well. And this wasn't just black churches; this is white ones too. But we finessed it because that's what we do. When we add our flavor to it, it just goes a whole nother direction. And that's what happened to a lot of our churches. And the churches that stayed with the strong Baptist, for the most part, Baptist kind of core, they end up getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they didn't keep up because of where the kind of culture of church was going at the time, was towards prosperity. And when you got a bunch of folks who are leaving the South, who are getting into these metropolitan areas in the Midwest, the Northeast, and the West, and they're seeing this prosperity, and they're seeing how these folks who are saying that they're Christian and they're living this life, and they got these nice fancy clothes and these big body Cadillacs, and they doing their thing. You want that too, because you left the South for economic opportunity. And when you left the South, you had to find what? A church home. And if that's the church that you're being fed and you're being told prosperity or poverty, those are the two options. That's what we lean towards. So I think we've become way more secular, just like the society has. We've gotten away from a lot of religion. Even myself, I'm not a religious person, but I realize this and I question, why am I not that religious? I don't believe in a lot of things that a lot of Christians do, but I understand the tool and the institution of religion. I think it's important because it gives you something, and it does impact those other three areas I was talking about. It impacts the financials because a lot of our money fluctuates through churches, where it used to. It does now go straight to Amazon and Netflix and McDonald's and corporations. That's our church now. Gucci. But yeah, barely that. I mean, man, we'll get into it. So it affects economics. It affects schools. Like I look at like Catholics, right? They'll have a daycare center. Then they'll have almost an elementary school. Some of them have middle schools and high schools, straight K through 12. We need to have Baptist versions of those things because they're educating their children how they want it to be, right? And then they pour money into that, and then they put those children into local politics, and then they send them off to the Catholic school. We have a really big one here in the Twin Cities called St. Thomas. St. Thomas, if you look at a lot of the people who run the Fortune 500 companies in the Twin Cities, a lot of them folks went to St. Thomas and St. Kate's and St. everything else, because that's how they set it up to maintain that structure, to make sure that those folks who believed in that religion had an opportunity to live in this state in a particular way. And we have to do the same thing. We have to compete. And it also affects family because there's expectations with that, right? There's expectations on how to have children, when to have children, when to get married. That stuff comes from a religious state. I think we've gotten very far away from Christianity, some for some good reasons, but a lot of it due to the trauma. But we didn't replace it with anything. It was just, we just got out of it. And now we're just existing and we're just out here. And all this goes back to the mental health conversation as well, because if you don't have those moral guides and those things that are leading you to a particular direction, you're aimless and you're just out here doing whatever. And then when I do a lot of work with adolescents, and one of my biggest goals as a therapist or just a mentor or just a brother who cares is to help those young people figure out what their vision is going to be. Because a lot of these young dudes and a lot of these young ladies don't have vision. They're just living moment by moment. They're in what we call survival mode. They have survival stress management, where they're literally just taking things moment by moment by moment. And if you ask them, where do you want to be when you turn 25? They have no idea because they haven't even thought that far. They're just trying to figure out what's the next lick, what's the next thing that's gonna make me feel good. What's literally the next thing. And if you have a critical mass of people who are living like that, that is a dangerous state to be in, because you are down for whatever, and it is on site. And there's all these little things that we say and we do is telling us where our psychological state is, that we don't have anything. Go for it.
That brings us into our next question. How did you get into this field? What prompted you to go into the mental health field?
Yeah, I fell into it accidentally. So when I was at the University of Minnesota, there were 3 young ladies that I was cool with. 2 of them I was trying to date. One of them I was just cool with her. Just be completely honest. And it was weird. It was all in one semester, and they all just kind of told me like they've been sexually abused before. And I didn't know what to do, because it was like, after the second one told me, I'm like, hey, that's weird. This other girl just told me that too. But then when the third one told me, I'm like, hey, this is getting a little strange. I don't know if like the sexual abuse is happening on campus or what. And I remember talking to my roommate about it. This is my best friend to this day. And I asked him, I said, why do you think these girls keep telling me this, man? Because, prior to this, I didn't know of anyone really who's been sexually abused. And he was like, Brandon, people like to talk to you because usually you listen very well and you usually give some sound advice. And he was like, you should think about becoming a therapist. I never thought of it until he brought it up. And then that was just kind of the back of my head, like, maybe I should. And then I landed a job in a psych ward, and I started to see these people who have what we call serious pristine mental illness. This is like high level mental health, psychosis, various different personality disorders, things like that. I started to see those folks. I'm like, damn, there's people who've been in the community who act just like this, but no one ever said it was mental health. It was just like, leave Vicky alone. That's why she talked to herself because something happened when she was younger. That's just how Roger is. It was never like that person has schizophrenia. It was never a conversation. And I'm sitting here, working my night shift, engaging with these folks. And I'm like, man, I know so many people in our community who have probably, similar mental illnesses as these people that are here getting treatment. And that was kind of the light bulb that no one's talking about it in our community. So let me be that kind of light. Let me be that person. And then that's when I said, well, if I'm going to make some money and have a career, let me start applying to jobs. And then I realized if you want to make money in the mental health world, you have to get what's called a mental health license. So that's what prompted me to go to grad school.
So with the people in our community, like, one, why do you think it's gone undiagnosed for so long? And 2, like, me being like just me, how would I recognize mental health if somebody is having like mental health issues?
Yeah, great questions. So for me, there's 2 reasons why it's gone on for so long. The first one is we never were given or created a language around what mental health is for us. And the reason for that is we've been taking hell for so long. We've learned how to cope with our trauma and our pain. And we built that into our culture. Our resiliency has been one of our main cultural identities. Literally, we used to call Black culture the struggle. Like, that's literally what we called our culture for so long. So for us, dealing with adversity, dealing with challenges, dealing with pain is nothing new. So if that's nothing new to us, why would somebody acting weird be anything different than what we're already doing? So we don't talk about it. The second reason that I think that we don't recognize it is it was never created for us, right? So the treatment for mental health was never created for us. It was created for affluent white folks, to be honest. It wasn't even made for all white people. If you had a serious mental illness back in the day, they used to put you in an asylum. And in some asylums, they were worse than prisons. Like, they used to torture people and do all these tests on them and give them medication and vaccines. They used to just treat people who had mental illness like really bad. So it's a fear-based thing, just like the medical system has been for us traditionally, always been tested on. But it was also one of those things that we just tried to avoid because it was another social trap for a lot of Black folks. A lot of stuff happened to us over time in the medical field. So, psychologically, it was just another one of those things that we try to avoid. So, there's some harm and some historical trauma around our engagement with the mental health world. It's also expensive. mental health treatment is not cheap. That's why a lot of insurance companies give you a limited amount of times to go before they're telling you to pay for it yourself, because it costs a lot of money. And there's not enough people that look like us that are in the field, right? It's hard for us to engage in something when we don't see each other. That's why Black people don't ski, because we don't see other Black people skiing. We just don't. We just don't see it, right? So we just don't do it typically, and that's it. It's nothing. I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated. So your second question was, how do I recognize it? Like, how do I notice if something's going on? And typically the telltale signs for just general mental health, not the serious pristine mental illnesses, is when you start to see drastic changes in the normal day-to-day things that people do. So like you start to notice that people are sleeping way more than they normally sleep, or you sleeping way less, right? Without like a defined example, like you're working on a project or you just had a baby or something like that. Like all of a sudden, you've been stressed out or overwhelmed, and now you're just getting way too much sleep, not enough sleep. You might not have any desire to be in public with around other people. It might raise your anxiety. You may be eating way more or eating way less. So your normal day-to-day activities start to change drastically. That's usually a sign that something's going on. If you start hearing voices or seeing things that might not be there, or you notice that your anxiety is high and you're afraid of things that you normally weren't afraid of, those are also signs that something's going on. You should probably talk to somebody. So those are the easier ones to pick up. Go ahead.
What causes mental health issues?
There's no easy answer for this, because no one really knows what causes mental health issues. There's so many different issues that it's hard to determine. There are some things that we do know that can increase the probability of having a mental health diagnosis. For example, we know that things like schizophrenia can be hereditary. So if I have someone in my family, let's say my great grandmother had schizophrenia, chances are my probability of having it is higher, and so are my children. Because genetically, that's one of the things that we have determined that can be passed from one generation to the next. But we also know that having significant trauma can lead to mental illness as well. So if I was sexually abused, or if I was jumped, or maybe I seen a murder or something like that, that can lead to levels of depression, that can lead to high levels of anxiety. We don't know if it can lead to any personality disorders, but it potentially could. Sometimes drug-induced disorders can happen as well. So you're popping Xannies and you're taking Addies and doing all these drugs. You're sipping lean, and all of a sudden you have developed a psychosis. That can happen. Or you might have been smoking some weed that was laced, or you had K2, and now all of a sudden you having some manic episodes that can lead to mental illness as well. But for the most part, there's no defined answer. Like, you could be sexually abused as a child and not have any type of psychological effects happen to you. And then there's some people who are sexually abused and they turn out to be psychopaths. Like like you really don't know. So there's no like defined factors to say if X happens, you're definitely going to have a mental illness.
Okay, so us as a community, right? We see a family member starting to drink more, starting to take more drugs. Yep. How do we go about opening up a conversation on how to deal with it? Mm-hmm. What's the good route?
Good question. It kind of depends on the role that you have in the family and who that person is. Because if that's Big Mama, that's a different type of conversation if there's your little brother. Like, it's just two different conversations, right? So let's say it is Big Mama. Big Mama's drinking all of a sudden, and you're like, damn, like, there's these bottles that just keep popping up all around the house. How do you approach that conversation? I would say you need to get who the trusted members are in the family who Big Mama listens to. So that might be your mom, that might be, her uncle or her brother or somebody. Get those folks and have a dialogue with them, because there needs to be a united front, because we know Big Mama has a lot of sway in the family. And in order to bring an issue to her, you're going to need a force. You can't just come talk to her by yourself. So try to get them on board and say, hey, I've been noticing this. Have you been noticing this? We think this might be a problem. She's on Social Security and her checks are getting low, and now she's borrowing money from all of us. Like, we got to figure out a way to, bring this situation to a halt, because if she keeps going down this road, her health may decline, or she might be financially in jeopardy. She may lose her home. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen to Big Mama if we don't figure this thing out, and then bring it to her with that evidence. Like, hey, we've been noticing this. What's going on? Are you feeling like you've been lonely? Like, folks haven't been calling you enough or coming to check on you? Like, what's happening? Have a dialogue with her so she realizes that, one, you all recognize what's happening, and two, that if she keeps, if she keeps going down this road, that ultimately is going to impact her livelihood, and you all don't want to, you all don't want that to happen to her. So that's the first approach, and then you can figure out, okay, what's the next steps? Does someone need to like be around her? Does she need, somebody to a home health aide or a cousin to come check on her weekly or daily? Like, you have to figure out what the strategy is going to be when it's her. Now, if it's somebody who doesn't have that much rank or status in your family, that's a different type of conversation. So let's just say it's your little brother, right? He's smoking weed, he's popping pills, he's sipping lean, he's out here living that future life. He's just doing his thing. He think he's pretty much just doing his thing. That's a different type of approach. Now you can say, look, man, like, I've noticed you've been doing this. Like, you're starting to, miss opportunities with the family. We ain't really heard from you. You're disappearing. Like, what's going on? That's a conversation that I would approach directly with the individual. Talk to them, try to figure out what their perspective is on what's happening. A lot of times when people are they minimize what they're doing. There's a lot of shame behind it. So you want to bring the conversation from a place where you're not shaming them for what they're doing, but you're just trying to generally understand what's happening. And then once you're able to have that dialogue, then it's like, okay, what's the next steps? Do you need to get into treatment? Do you need to come stay with somebody? Like, what's happening? Because if you keep, because the message of this person is, if you keep going down this road, it's ultimately going to jeopardize what you got going on. You might lose your job or get kicked out of school or whatever the case may be. So does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So do you think mental health and politics like have any relation?
Absolutely. Now, we, from outside looking in, a lot of times as a community, we will look at some notable politicians and think they are mentally ill. And that will form our judgments on how we vote, or if we vote, or how we engage politically and things like that. But also on the flip side, a lot of things that we are fed politically leads to our own levels of anxiety, our own levels of stress and trauma. Like right now, we have inflation that's just insane right now. There's a lot of people who are financially struggling, but they don't realize how it's contributing to their own mental health. That's a political thing, and that contributes to how we feel and our abilities to even understand, what's going on. We might be a little bit more stressed out because we done paid an extra $25 for groceries this month, and we didn't realize that's why I'm stressed out, and that's why I'm yelling at my kids, or they're getting on my nerves, or that's why I don't want to go to work because if somebody else say something to me, I'm gonna have to cuss them out, find a new job. Like, a lot of that stuff feeds into our own mental well-being, and we don't even realize it. So politics plays a huge role in our mental health.
So how do you, as a mental health expert, and me as a family member or friend of somebody dealing with mental health illness, how do we keep that from affecting our lives?
Yeah, I mean, me being a mental health expert, I'm still a human being, and I would say that the best thing that we can do is we have to take care of ourselves. Right now in society, there's something called self-care, and I find self-care to be one of those things that it's just fascinating how we talk about it. I'm down with self-care to a certain extent. I don't like how it's been taught to all of us. Self-care has been taught to us in a very reactionary way. It's like something bad in your life happens, now go meditate, go drink your fancy tea, go do yoga, get your steps in on your Fitbit and your Apple Watch. Like, that's how we've been taught self-care. And what I'm saying as a Black man especially is we need to be proactive with our self-care. We need to be thinking about being sustainable in what we do. We know we live tough lives. We know we have some tough jobs. We know people who get on our nerves that we have to deal with every day. So be proactive with your self-care. Do all those things before the thing that agitates you shows up or stresses you out shows up, so you can be better equipped to deal with those things. And sometimes thinking about how to strategize and deal with those things is self-care as well. It's being able to navigate through a lot of the adversity and frustration that shows up in your life. Now, we're not robots. We are human. Things will happen. We will have to respond and react to things, but it's better to be equipped when you are in a your nutrition's in the right space, your head's in the right space, you are in a space where you are ready to deal with whatever's coming your way, so it doesn't stress you out. You've thought through it a little bit and you can kind of move forward. So whether you're a mental health professional or not, I think that's the best course of action for many of us.
Okay, so your motto is live your life with purpose on purpose.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yes, I'm a big purpose-driven person. I was kind of talking about this earlier when I was talking about the 4 institutions. You know, I would say Generation X was probably the last generation that their purpose was really defined for them. Where their parents said, do this, this, and this, like go to school and get a good job. Like that helps give a vision and a purpose for folks. For millennials on down, we had to figure out our purposes on our own. I don't know why, but we kind of had to figure it out for ourselves. So what I see is a lot of folks who don't have a defined, not one purpose. I think in life, we have many different purposes and we should have things to live for. And we should be intentional on living for those things. So I see my job, one of my jobs as a mental health professional, when I do work with individuals, is helping them define what their purposes are in life. Because if I can't help them figure out where they're going, like an aim, they're never going to get better. You're going to stay stuck, and you're going to stay stuck in the past, and you're going to stay stuck in the present. My job is to help move you forward to the best of my ability. So if you live life with purpose, on purpose, you're being intentional about the things you're working on. So a lot of times people ask me about that too. They're like, well, what are your purposes? Well, my first purpose is to be a great husband and a great father. I have to show up every day for my wife in a particular way. And she has expectations for how she wants me to show up. I have expectations for how I show up. We talk about those. We set those boundaries around those things. And then I perform my side of the duty. She performs hers. That's part of my purpose. And then that relates to my children. Like I have to be dad. I have little girls. I have no sons. I wish I could have a son, but I'm scared to have another kid because I have another girl. I'm gonna lose my mind, man. Woo, boy. So I have to be like pseudo dad to like all these boys in the community because I don't got my own son. But I have to show up for those young ladies a particular way. One, as their father, but two, just as a black man, because they don't have a lot of engagements with black men. They just don't. The black men aren't teachers. I was so happy my girls are learning to swim right now. One of the instructors is a black dude. I was like, thank God. And my daughter was like, her instructor's a black man, because outside of me and my brothers and some of my family members and their family members, they don't really see black men out like doing professions and doing things, right? Like they just don't. Like they don't see black men working at the grocery store. They don't see black men at Target. Like they just don't see it. And that's important. So I have to show up, one, as dad, but also how that engagement is. I'll tell a quick story. One of the funniest things that just happened, it's so funny. My daughters were talking to my wife and I was just eavesdropping on the conversation. And they were like, yeah, when dad sees people, he always talks to them. He talks to them different. So my wife was like, what do you mean? And he's like, and then she was like, act it out. So they was like, oh, what's up, bro? And they did like the bro hug thing and they like patted the back. But they realized that when black men connect, it's a different engagement. I didn't know they were watching that, but they understood that there was a different type of love and engagement there. Because I'll take them to the barbershop sometimes with me and things like that. And they see dad as a different person in this space, but it's healthy. It's not like they're scared of it or anything like that. That's part of my purpose. They're supposed to see that, because I know if I leave them to just watch YouTube or Netflix, they ain't gonna just see that. They're gonna see black men arguing and fighting and all types of stuff. So I have to be that example. I also have purpose in the community. And now I'll shut up and let y'all get some more questions in.
Okay,
so, go ahead.
No, because I wanted to touch on that, Trash. Because I like it, because I do the same exact thing. My son, he always asks me, why you always see black guys and you always slap hands with them and say, what's up, bro? Right? Like that's one. And then my daughter mentioned the other day, and I do this on purpose, I go to stores where black people work at, and she said, oh, it was good to see black people working here. And I was like, wow, she noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like I just did it on purpose, but she actually noticed, you know, so that was good.
The baby's always watching. They're always watching.
Exactly. So our next set of questions is rapid fire, quick 20-second answers.
All right. I'll make it quick.
So what's the most important thing you've learned in life?
Ooh, be intentional.
Okay, if you could turn back the hands of time to when you were 18, what would you tell yourself and why?
You're not gonna be with her forever. And the reason is I used to be in love with this girl. Her name's Ashley. Shout out to Ashley. Boy, she broke my heart. But man, yeah, it's not gonna last as long as I thought it was.
Hey, so if you had a chance to sit down with somebody and have a conversation, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Ooh, man, there's two people. Can I get one dead and one alive?
Yeah.
So I'll do alive. So I'll do dead first. Dr. Amos Wilson. I don't know if folks know who that is, but I would love to have a talk with Dr. Amos Wilson. And alive, I would love to talk to 50 Cent. I think he is a lot smarter than people think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
All right. So people always say you should save and invest money. What type of assets do you invest in?
Oh man, so I have a financial advisor, and she does all my stocks. She's a Black woman. She does all my investing. So that's my main asset right now. And we ain't looking too good because of all this inflation. We was doing well a year ago. But that's my main asset. I would say is my investments. Yeah, and I would say my children are investments as well. I try to pour in so many different experiences with them to see how they're going to flourish and turn out as well.
All right. What is one tool you use to make your business run smooth?
Oh, dang, that's a good question. I would say QuickBooks, but that's not. I mean, I can run that with something else. Evernote. Most people probably don't know what Evernote is. It is a notebook tool, but it does all types of stuff with organizing. I'm very dependent on Evernote.
Yeah, I remember Evernote. It's old school, but yeah.
Hey man, they made a lot of updates. It's still around.
No, it's still in the digital world though.
Yeah,
when I say old school, right?
Oh yeah.
But
I got notes from 2012 and that thing.
And you can tag them to different things too, so you can find them easier, right? Like it's really a good tool that people miss. No. Yeah. Hey, so if you could recommend one book, what would it be?
Oh man, recommend one book. What would it be? The Compensatory Code System Concept by Mr. Nellie Fuller Jr., also known as the Code Book.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your best tip for making our community a better place?
The best tip, we have to build healthy male-female dynamics and co-parenting.
Okay. How do you balance your family life and your work life?
I'm dependent on my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So I try to block time out for family, because a lot of times work overshadows a lot of the stuff when it comes to family. But so again, being intentional with my actions.
How do you celebrate your wins?
Oh, that's a great question. I buy myself things that I probably shouldn't buy, like tech stuff. Like I got like 4 microphones, PlayStation 5. I like tech things. So, I'll save my money, and then when I get that win, I just go out there and purchase some tech.
Hey, no, that's good. I'm gonna buy my son one of them PlayStations, the updated one, because this guy told me, he said, man, you know how I taught my son football? Was the PlayStation game.
Really?
Yeah, he run the plays.
Madden. Yeah.
Right? Like, anyway.
That's funny.
So last question, how can people find you?
I can be found on all social media platforms at by Brandon Brandon Jones Jones. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on TikTok too. Even though I don't do any posting there, but you can find me on those socials, or you can go to my website, www.jegna.org. So that's jegna.org.
Look, second question. I'm sorry. What does Jegna mean?
Great question. A lot of people don't ask that. They just go with it. They can't pronounce it. A Jegna is a special person who dedicates themselves to protecting, preserving, and providing for our young people. It's a word that comes out of the area that's now known as Somalia.
Oh, wow.
That's dope. I love that one.
Yeah.
That's definitely how we should go ahead and end it.
Absolutely.
That's dope.
Hey, so Rhonda, what do you want to leave the people with?
Check on your people. Make sure they're good mentally.
Yes.
All right, cool. How about you, Chad?
Man, just because somebody's smiling don't mean that and they telling you they good don't mean that they're good. A phone call helps. It goes a long way. And be good to yourself too.
Absolutely.
How about you, Brandon? What's something you want to leave the people with?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier, but live life with purpose on purpose. Finding your purpose is not hard. Sticking to it is difficult. So just make sure that you align yourself with what makes sense to you and what makes you feel good.
Yep, I would say you guys grab out your phone book. Sometimes people go through things and you don't know they're going through something. Sometimes they just need to talk to somebody. Grab your phone book, scroll through your phone book, call somebody, and have it in your mind that you're just going to talk to them for 5 minutes and get that out of the way. You might talk to them for an hour, you might talk to them for 10 minutes, but at least you had a chance to touch somebody or talk to somebody that's special in your life. Hey, you guys, this is We Got Problems, and we also have solutions, and we out.
From the team at CRC Empire, we want to thank you for listening. To stay connected with us, like, share, and subscribe to the We Got Problems podcast. You can find us on social media platforms at Curtis Martin 247, at Rhonda Wrights Official, and at the_trash_vegan_. We got problems and we got solutions.